I thought I did a video on this, but I can't find it, so I'm going to do another video. This is a fusee clock, and from the research that I found, it's made by Meyer. Meyer's a German person who moved to London, and he made this clock. This is my only fusee clock. It's considered a drop dial case, I believe. And the issue that I'm having with this clock is I got the pendulum raised all the way up and it's still running too fast. That could be a couple of things. One thing it could be is the burge and crutch assembly is not adjusted properly. And so if the burge is, let's say, the entry versus the exit is not the same, the burge could be sitting there ticking away really fast. So that could be an issue. Another issue is the suspension leader wire could be too long. And it could also have the wrong pendulum bob on it. But the clock originally had a paper dial on it, and I didn't like it. It was a white paper dial, and I understand why they put the white paper dial, that way they could see the hands, but I wanted it originally, and I believe that this original, because it has the word born right here, and so we're going to take this apart and inspect it. There is a little inspection window right here on the side. You can't see it, and there's another one on this side, and then there's a door down here on the bottom. Here's the door for the right side of the clock. Here's the winding key, and I believe it's original. I'm going to show you what the chimes, or sorry, the strike sounds like. It only strikes on the hour. Now this is a wooden plate fusee movement, and as soon as I take that dial off, I'll show you the movement. Now the clock itself has a pin that you pull out of the minute arbor center wheel to take the hands off, and then there's a washer, and then the minute hand, and then the hour hand. Now, this dial is nailed on, and that's the pendulum swinging in there. So here is the pendulum, and I believe it is original to the clock. So that's why I'm thinking either the burge is not adjusted right, or the leader wire itself, the suspension wire, is not adjusted right. So I might get some people upset with me at what I'm fixing to do, but this is the only way to take this dial off. Is by prying it off. And there's the back of the dial, and it comes in two pieces. The wooden part comes out of the center ring. So here you can see it's a wooden plate movement, and I'm trying to remember how I got this out. I think there's a pin in here that you take the movement out with. So stand by, let me take the movement out. It took me a bit to figure it out, but inside you could see two nuts that are on a seat board, and once I take those nuts off, then I could take the movement out. You should be able to see a nut there and a nut there. It's just like on a grandfather clock, the movement is on a seat board. Now one is original to the movement, and I believe that this is original to the movement, and the other one is a Phillips screw that somebody put in there. But once I took those out, the movement comes right out of the top of the case. And look how beautiful this case is. This is the trap door that you use to adjust the pendulum, and you can also store your key, paperwork, whatever in there. I think that's brass. Here's the bell up here. Needs tightened down just a little bit, and then it'll get a stronger ping. But beautiful case. And here's the movement. I'm going to say that the pendulum suspension wire here has been replaced, and it is the wrong size. It needs to be shorter. Because if you look inside at the movement itself, if I can find a side that you can see, the verge and crutch assembly if it was wrong, the escapement wheel would be skipping teeth. There is a small notch on this side of the crutch. I never did take this movement apart when I got it. I inspected it. I hung it on the wall. It runs perfect, but it runs too fast. A clock that runs slow would tell me it needs cleaned up and that it's dirty. But a clock that runs too fast, like I said, the suspension spring here, I could then, if it was running too slow and you got your pendulum all the way down, you can bend out the suspension spring to make it go faster. But because it's going too fast, I can't bend out the suspension spring. I cannot add to the suspension spring. What I can do is shorten the wire here. And I think it needs to be shortened maybe 1/4 of an inch. Let me grab the pendulum again and we'll discuss the pendulum. What did I do with it? Here it is. I could shorten it, an inch. And that inch that inch would speed up this thing, and I have all this to slow it down if I shortened it too much. So if I shorten it an inch, I've got maybe 2 inches here to slow it down. But I'm not going to put it back in the case. See, I got 2 inches to slow it down. But I'm not going to put the movement back in the case until I run it a while to see whether I need to shorten the suspension spring some more. I have enough suspension springs that will last me a lifetime. When I ordered through Time Savers, like right now, I need those suspension springs that I broke on my clock that I was repairing recently, and I need a mainspring or 2 for another clock. But to me, it's not worth ordering when you have such a small quantity to order, because Time Savers charges you a minimum handling and rate. If you order something for $1, it's going to cost you probably $10 because they charge you like $8 minimum handling rate, and then plus the shipping. So what I'm getting at is when I order through Time Savers, I go through the stuff that is on sale just to make up for ordering such a low quantity stuff. That way I'm not charged that minimum $8 handling fees. And I have plenty of, sorry, these are cuckoo clock pendulum sticks, but I have plenty of suspension springs, and this is the way they come. And what you do is you determine where you want to cut it off at, and again, it's an experimental thing. You unless you got the original one in your hand, and then you would have to make sure that the suspension spring itself is the same diameter as the original one in hand, or that's going to change um, your it could speed up your clock if this is thinner. So it's an experimental thing. You determine what you want to do. You break it off. You bend a loop, and you test out your movement. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, because I have all these brand new ones that I told you will last me a lifetime, I'm just going to replace the suspension spring with one of these. And you will notice that these rods are smaller diameter than the original rod, so I'm sure that will affect it also. So I'm going to make this loop about a half inch below the birch crutch assembly's foot. So this will be up here, and then this will hang on to this, and then I'm going to test it out. But isn't this a beautiful movement? Let me rotate the hands and let you watch what goes on. Now, unlike a cuckoo clock that we've been working on lately, this clock, if you look at the minute arbor here, it only has one pen on it. So therefore, it is only going to strike on the hour. And if this wasn't standing straight up and down at the minute hand, and let me get the minute hand, if it's not standing straight up and down when it goes off, which that might be a little off. You have to adjust this metal piece here to either lift it up or lift it down. That way when it catches this post, your clock goes off when the hand is straight up and down. I'm looking to see if the hand drops. If the hand drops, I'm sure that behind this wheel here, there's a compression washer. And if your hand is too tight, because this wheel here controls the pressure of the minute hand, just like in a antique cuckoo clock. And this lever here is what controls that pressure. There's not a compression washer on the inside, but the pressure is controlled by this lever here. So if your hands are dropping, you would have to squeeze this lever toward this wheel to tighten it up. And remember that this thing is over 150 years old, and so you don't want to be adjusting it too much if you don't have to. And just like in a cuckoo clock, you have your 8-point star wheels right here. And the gong lever, it doesn't matter in this clock because you don't have cuckoo levers also. So the gong lever can be away from, can be in the middle of these two tabs. But I think if I bent it toward the tab more, so it's barely resting off the tab, you would get a stronger gong. But I'm not going to, because like I said, this clock is over 150 years old. And the only thing I'm going to do is change out the suspension leader wire. And then put it on a test stand and test it to see whether I need to. When you do something like this, because you know it's going too fast, when you do something like this, you might want to have this nut all the way out on top. I take that back. Because it's going too fast, if it was going too slow, I would have the nut all the way on top. Because it's going too fast, I'm going to put this nut all the way on the bottom. And hope that it is going too slow. And I'm going to have to straighten out this because it's bent. So anyway, by putting the nut all the way on the bottom because it's going too fast, hopefully it goes too slow, and that way I can adjust it. If it's going too slow, and then I will take the nut from the bottom and put it in the middle and see what happens. You will know within a couple of hours whether it's going too slow or what. And the original suspension spring has got two pins on it, one here and one up here. This one up here allows the suspension spring to drop. This one right here allows the suspension spring to drop, and you can you can actually drill different holes in the suspension spring to, you could cut some of the suspension spring off is what I'm getting at, and drill another hole and raise it up to speed up the clock. But I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is use a new suspension spring and cut the wire off so that the hook is just, like I said, maybe a 1/4 inch below the foot. Now to put this clock in beat, there are two screws. There's one here and one here. And you loosen the screws and you can lift this brass lever up some to get the entry and exit pallets adjusted just right. So that's what I'm doing now, because I want the clock, as you can see, it's level. I want this to be ticking away while there's no suspension spring on it, but I want it to be ticking away normally. When I raise it up too much, did you hear that? The escapement wheel was just spinning without the crutch assembly being on. This, I think, might be a little bit too fast, so I want to drop the pallets. And it only takes minute adjustments with the screws loose. Once I put it on my stand where I want to put it, and I got the pendulum on and I got it in beat, I'll put my beat amplifier on it and listen for the even tick-tock, and I might have to raise or lower this more to get that even tick-tock. Because if you're, and I could be wrong on this clock, if your crutch assembly is ticking away too fast like that, I want to look inside to look at the escapement wheel to make sure it's not skipping. Because if it's skipping, your clock will run too fast. And just like all my other videos where I say that you want to get this thing swinging back and forth, so when you touch it, it continues to swing. That has just been my experience. And so, again, and I chose to keep the same suspension spring because this is original. And so I'm going to keep the same suspension spring. I just cut just a little bit off of it. Not a lot. And if I could find the pen, I'm used to pulling this way to the right as you're looking from the rear of the movement to take the pen out and put it back in. But in this particular case, I guess somebody was left-handed because they put it in from the left. And I'm going to put it back in from the right. It doesn't have that much of a taper on it. I'm trying to see if the holes are lined up. You might have to put it in from the left. The holes look lined up. They might have a smaller hole over there on the left side. But this thing doesn't have much of a taper on it, and I'm going to put a taper on it using my Dremel. Now that I got a taper on it, I could put the thing back on. And there we go. So I might have to change the screws, but now I'm going to put the hands on, put it on my stand, and let it test. I dropped the pen that goes into this hole for the minute arbor with center wheel. I've got pens that I bought from Time Savers. I don't like them. They're cheap. So I took a paper clip. I got it in my drill. The paper clip is a little bit too big, so I'm going to thin it out. Like I said, the ones from Time Savers, they're made in India, and they're like a one-time use type thing. And so even though I got a bunch of them, I don't like them. That is starting to work, so I need to thin it out some more. The drill being turned on and the Dremel being turned on at the same time works faster. And plus, putting it in your drill, you're making sure that it's staying round and not end up flat. I had too much stuff in my way. That's through. So I'm going to cut what I don't need off. And what you typically do is make it into an S. That way it doesn't come out on you. And now it's sort of like an S. That way it won't come out on me. And here I have the clock on my stand. Clock is level. And so I'm just going to let it sit for an hour or so and see what happens. I hope y'all are enjoying this video. You have to wait until it's the clock settled down a little bit before you put a beat amplifier on it, because if you put your beat amplifier on it right away, it might sound good, but after it's settled down, that's not quite right. And there's not that much of a difference when I raise the movement. So I think tilting the clock and getting it in beat will be fine, because it's not going to be that far off. When I first bought the clock, I researched the clock and I came with this one, a drop dial clock. It shows Meyer on the dial and then London, but it looks very similar to my clock, except for this is a time only. But the bottom section, it looks exactly the same. Here it says Walna drop dial anti-clock, brass inlays to the case with a pendulum aperture, a 12 inches painted dial, and moon blue steeled hands, an 8 duration fusee timepiece mechanism, circular 1860. The antique clock was made by a German clockmaker, Meyer, who came to London, as many others did, with clockmaking skills. The mechanisms are only wood frame, but this is a high-quality fusee with a continental design, an interesting clock. And this clock sold for 725 pounds. And here is, if I can get more pictures to come up here. Here's the bottom section. Like I said, mine looks exactly like that. And then here's the movement itself. So I believe my clock was made by Meyer around 1860-ish. And again, this one sold for about $900 back when it sold. But this is a time-only clock. Mine is a strike clock, so I'm thinking the price range is double that. I just my estimated value. Here it says width 16 inches, height 25 inches. And mine is the same measurements, but let's talk about that. If you measure just the case width itself, it's only 10 inches, or 9 3/4 of an inch. But if you measure the dial, and I'm pretty sure that's where they're measuring it from, it is 14 1/2 inches wide and 25 inches tall. But as you can see, this section here and this section here is the exact same design as that Meyer clock. So my clock is a little bit smaller in width than this clock. And the reason why is because theirs is an octangle dial frame, where mine is a circle. So if you were to cut that out in that circle, you would see less of a width. But again, I think it's a Meyer clock. I could be wrong on the date, because if it's the original dial, the name foreign marking, usually under the 6 on the clock face, stems from an option that was specified in the UK's Merchandise Act of 1926. But I'm not for sure if I'm going to have to do some more research on the maker to see if they were still making clocks during that time frame. I still think my clock is closer to 1880, and it's possibly it is the wrong dial, and they made it up. Here's another one, a price of $1,552, time only. It's a nice dial. It shows it was made in 1840. English-made clock. Fusee movement. But it's different style from mine. Now, a drop dial case clock is different from a schoolhouse clock. As you can see, there's hardly any base for the school clock. But here's a drop dial clock, and it's got a lot of fancy carvings on it. Eight-day with strike. Circular 1860. Amazing Welsh drop dial twin fusee clock 8-day. Another drop dial clock, but it's time only. And I'm sure circular 1880. It's a beautiful clock, but if it had strike, that price would be a lot more. Here's one that recently sold, and they don't show any information about the movement. It sold for about $130 to include shipping. Not quite like mine, but similar. But not seeing the movement. She doesn't say whether or not it's got a fusee movement in it, and the fusee movements are what people are after. Here's a beautiful one. It says it's the J.W. Richardson Darlington 8-day striking drop dial wall clock. Again, no picture of the movement, but it's sold for $278, then another $70, so $340 to include shipping. Working order and strikes on a bell every hour, just like mine, but it says it's 1920 to 1949. I doubt if it's a fusee movement. Here's one that shows it's a antique rosewood drop dial twin fusee movement. Is sold for $858, then another $83 in shipping, $103. So we're looking at $961. It's a beautiful clock. It's got the grapes on it. And there's the movement, showing it's a fusee movement. They're showing the period as 1950 to 1959, error 1911 to 1940. Again, I don't know a lot about the fusee movements to say whether that is true or not, because most of them were made in the 1800s. Here's one where they accepted the offer, and it costs about $1,800 plus $49 in shipping. Time only. It shows that it is a 8-day fusee movement. So I'm going to see if there's any maker marks on the movement. I didn't see them. There's a pendulum just like mine, but it doesn't show the date on this clock. It shows, this is the description. No date. The hands on my clock are not moving. Now, two things can cause that. If you don't have any end shake, it's putting everything in a bind, but that typically will stop the clock. And the other thing, the way this clock is designed, this minute wheel with minute arbor on like an anti-cuckoo clock, it is part of the great wheel. But this minute wheel with minute arbor is on like a modern day cuckoo clock, so it has no how do I say this? It has no torque, or it has no gearing to make it spin. What makes it spin is this minute pipe here. Now, if the minute pipe doesn't have enough pressure on it, then that will cause the hands not to turn also. But I want to alleviate the possibility that it's the end shake, so I'm going to let the power down on this clock. I selected a key that will fit into this tube. Once I give it a little bit of a turn, I can release the click spring. And the click spring is this piece right here. That's the click, which is catching these gears on the lower tube. But the upper tube here is how you wind the clock. And when I unwind it, that cable is going to go inside this barrel. At least it's supposed to. So putting some pressure on the winding arbor to release the click, which I cannot do, so I have to release the pressure from down below. And now I have to find a key that will fit on here, which so far I don't have one. First time working on a fusee movement, so this is all new to me. So hopefully I have a key. There we go. And then I should be able to wind this part up to release the click. Hopefully I don't screw anything up. I'm going to do it this way. Slowly releasing the tube in my hand. I thought the cable would go back inside this barrel, but apparently I'm wrong. I might have just screwed up my clock. It's still got some pressure there. So the only thing I did that for, so I can take this off to see if I have end shake, which I do. So I'm okay with everything else, and so I'm going to go back to my original statement saying that there wasn't enough pressure to make that the minute wheel with minute arbor center wheel. There wasn't enough pressure on it, so I'm going to put more pressure on it by adding more washers, which in turn should put more pressure on it to allow the hands to rotate. I was looking at my original post in my group, and I made a comment saying that the hands weren't turning. They originally were turning when I first got the clock, but because I took it apart, I must have not have put enough spacers here to put that pressure on the minute wheel with minute arbor. Just my luck. Now the barrel is slipping. So now I'm going to have to take the time side section off, which the cool thing about these old clocks, you got two different plates. You take the time side off under this plate, and the strike side is on this plate. But not today. Just my luck. And again, first time working on this kind of movement, I should have asked my good friend Sean about taking the power off, because I thought that the cable would go inside this barrel. And I'm pretty sure the cable does go inside this barrel. Not inside the barrel, but wrapped around the barrel, just like this. Because you see all these lines. You see all these lines on this barrel? That's from that cable. As it unwinds, it wraps around that barrel. But for whatever reason, this did not want to wrap around the barrel, and there's a spring inside this barrel, and that spring has came loose. I'm sure it's an easy fix, just like on every other barrel type movements, but I'm not going to fix it today. My back is hurting.